The night above Earth's skies was restless. Across the surface, cities glowed with light, but in the silence of orbit, fleets of alien warships gathered. They had come from distant parts of the galaxy, drawn by the call of the Queen and her people. Some of these fleets were loyal allies of the Queen, ready to risk everything to defend her honor and her throne. Others had been watching quietly, uncertain of where this fight would lead, and above all of them stood the human fleet. Shining like blades in the darkness, the warships were massive and strong, but what made them different was not their steel or their cannons. It was the humans inside fighters trained in hardship, in survival, and in courage. They stood ready, watching, waiting for the order. General. Marcus stood on the command deck of the flagship Eternal Resolve. His eyes were fixed on the holographic display that showed the battle lines forming. Beside him, Queen Seraphina of the alien court stood with her crew, though her eyes burned. With determination, her hand rested on the console for balance. She knew what was coming. The enemy fleet was larger than anything her people had ever faced. "They want your throne," Marcus said firmly, his deep voice cutting through the low hum of the room. "They think you are weak because you turned to us. They don't understand." Yet, Seraphina nodded, her voice steady despite the weight pressing on her. "They will understand soon. They will know what it means when humanity fights beside us." The first wave of enemy ships broke formation. Thousands of fighters shot forward, a storm of steel and fire. They came like arrows aimed at the heart. Of Earth's defenders? The alarms on the flagship sounded, but Marcus did not flinch, raised his hand, and every captain of the human fleet leaned closer to their consoles, waiting the order. "Release the hounds," Marcus said simply. The order moved like lightning through the channels. In moments, bays opened, and human fighters burst into space. They were fast, agile, built for sudden turns and speed. Pilots inside gripped their controls with steel nerves. They dove straight into the swarm of alien fighters, weaving, dodging, and striking with deadly precision. The battle became a dance of light and death. Explosions lit the darkness, and the clash of weapons echoed through the cums. Alien pilots soon realized that these humans fought differently. They did not break under pressure. They did not retreat in fear. They charged even harder when outnumbered. One alien captain shouted across the channel, his voice breaking, "These humans, they fight like nothing we've seen." Another voice responded, panicked, "They are tearing through us. Fall back. Fall back." But retreat was not an option. The second wave of the enemy fleet pushed forward, larger ships now entering the fray. Their cannons glowed, sending beams of energy across the battlefield. Several human fighters were struck, exploding into fire. A deep silence fell over some parts of the human command, but Marcus's voice cut through it like a blade. "They gave their lives for Earth and for freedom. Honor them by fighting harder." His words carried across every ship, fueling the hearts of every human soldier. They pressed on, weaving around beams, striking weak points in the larger ships. Alien allies who had come to stand with Seraphina joined the humans, pushing against the tide. Inside the flagship, Seraphina stood taller, her voice strong. "My people, hear me. This is not just for a throne. This is for our future. Stand with the humans, and we will rise together," our crew cheered, voices echoing through the cums. Hope flared brighter than fear. Hours passed, and the battlefield grew more chaotic. Both sides had lost ships. Wreckage floated like broken bones across the void, yet the humans pressed forward, their will unbroken. Where one fighter fell, another filled the gap. Where a ship was destroyed, another held the line. But then, something new appeared on the scanners. The enemy's true flagship emerged from the darkness. It was enormous, dwarfing even the largest human warships. Its hull was black, its weapons glowing with energy that seemed alive. The enemy commander, a ruthless warlord named Zareth, had finally revealed himself. The sight of the ship brought a hush to the fleet. Many alien allies wavered, their courage faltering, but the humans did not. Marcus stared at the ship with calm eyes. "So, the beast shows itself at last." Seraphina clenched her fists, her voice sharp. "That is the one who wants my throne." That is the one who betrayed my people. The enemy flagship powered its weapons. A beam of energy as wide as a city shot forward, tearing through space. It struck one of the Allied ships, splitting it apart in seconds. Gasps echoed across the comms, but Marcus only raised his voice louder. All ships, tighten formation. Protect the Queen's vessel. We will cut that monster down, piece by piece, human. Warships shifted, forming a wall around Seraphin's ship. Their shields glowed as they absorbed blast after blast. Smaller fighters dove toward the enemy flagship, striking its shields again and again. The monster ship shook but did not fall. Inside the enemy vessel, Warlord Zareth watched the battle unfold. His face twisted in rage as he saw human ships refuse. To break their insects, he hissed. Why do they fight so hard? An advisor whispered, fear in his voice. Because they are human, they do not fight for thrones. They fight for each other, Zareth snarled, slamming his fist on the console. Then let them die together. The battle stretched into a storm. Human ships burned, but so did the enemy. Every blast, every strike, every sacrifice pushed the humans closer. Finally, Marcus gave the order they had been waiting for. Fleets focus fire. Bring down their shields. Hundreds of weapons fired at once. Beams and missiles tore through the dark, smashing into the enemy flagship. Its shields flickered, then collapsed. The giant ship shuddered as explosions tore through its hull. Marcus clenched his fist. Now, strike at the heart. Human fighters dove in, slipping through cracks in the hull. They planted charges deep inside, risking everything. Moments later, the ship erupted in a roar of fire. Breaking apart into fragments, the enemy fleet saw their leader destroyed. Fear spread through their ranks, faster than any command. Ships turned, fleeing into the void. The battle was not over, but the tide had broken. Humanity and its allies stood victorious in that moment. On the flagship, silence filled the room. Before cheers erupted, crews shouted, cried, and embraced. Seraphina closed her eyes, whispering softly, "We are free." Marcus stood at her side, his voice calm but strong. This is only the beginning. The galaxy now knows Earth's finest fighters. They will never forget this night. Far beyond the battlefield, across the galaxy, news of the victory began to spread. Worlds that had once doubted humanity now whispered their name with awe. The humans had not only saved a queen, they had changed the fate of the stars. The sky above the alien world burned red with fire. Ships clashed high above the capital city. Flashes of light tearing through the clouds as plasma bolts rained down like falling stars. On the ground, the streets were chaos. Civilians fled. Soldiers tried to form lines, and the palace guards rushed to protect their queen and her daughter, the young princess of the royal line. But the enemy had struck fast, faster than anyone had believed possible. Raiders from beyond the Empire's border had somehow broken through the defenses and landed their forces deep in the heart of the city, in the center of the storm. A sleek transport shuttle carried the princess and her child, rushing through the alleys toward safety. But the raiders had seen it. They chased it down like wolves after prey. Armored beasts with burning weapons in their hands. The shuttle's escort ships were destroyed one after another. Smoke poured into the sky. The palace guards who survived the ambush fell back into the city streets, but they were too few, too scattered. The transport was cornered, its engines failing. The enemy closed in, ready to claim their prize, the heir to the throne. That was when a human appeared. He was not meant to be there. He was not part of the Empire's soldiers, nor a knight sworn to the crown. His name was Daniel Cross, and he was just a human mercenary who had drifted from one war zone to another. To most aliens in the galaxy, humans were nothing special. They were seen as reckless, stubborn, and often too emotional. But Daniel was different. He had survived too many battles, seen too much loss, and he carried a spirit that no alien could quite understand. Daniel had been in the city when the attack came, repairing a damaged cargo ship at the starport. When the alarm sounded and explosions shook the streets, he didn't run for shelter like the others. Instead, he grabbed his rifle, strapped on his old armor, and went where the fighting was loudest. It wasn't duty. It wasn't pay. It was something inside him that refused to leave people to die. He found the princess's transport just as it was being forced down in a narrow plaza. Raiders in black armor surrounded it, their weapons glowing. Daniel saw palace guards already. Dead on the ground, their blades shattered, their bodies burned. The transport side hatch opened, and a small figure stumbled out, a child, young and terrified, clutching her mother's hand. The princess was tall and regal, her silver hair catching the firelight. She tried to shield her daughter with her body, but she had no weapon in her hands. The raiders laughed as they closed in. Already tasting victory, Daniel raised his rifle and opened fire. The first raider fell before he even realized what hit him. The second spun around, snarling, just in time to catch another shot to the chest. Others roared, their alien voices filled with rage. They turned their weapons on the human who dared to challenge them. Daniel moved fast. Using the plaza's broken stone pillars for cover, his rifle barked, sharp and deadly, every shot landing with brutal precision. The raiders fired back, plasma bolts smashing into walls and shattering debris. Sparks flew, air filled with the stink of burning metal. The princess pulled her child back toward the transport, but the engines were dead. There was nowhere to run. She watched the strange warrior fighting alone, his figure moving like a shadow between bursts of light. His armor was dented, his weapon old. Yet he fought with the strength of 10 men, for the first time since the attack began. The princess felt a spark of hope. Daniel shouted over the gunfire, "Get down! Keep the kids safe!" The princess obeyed, shielding her daughter as Daniel rolled from cover and fired 3 shots in quick succession. Another raider fell, but one managed to charge forward, swinging a blade of crackling energy. Daniel barely raised his rifle in time, the blade slicing it in half. Sparks burst. He dropped the useless weapon and drew his combat knife. The alien towered over him, its armored form twice his size. It roared and swung again. Daniel ducked under the strike, drove forward, and buried the knife deep into the raider's throat. The creature staggered, gurgling, then fell lifeless at his feet. More were coming. Too many. Daniel snatched the raiders. Fallen weapon, heavy and strange, but he fired it anyway. Plasma bolts tore into the enemy ranks. He fought like a man possessed, driven not by orders, not by duty, but by the need to protect the innocent behind him. Every alien that fell bought a few more seconds for the princess and her child to live. The child cried, clinging to her mother, but her wide eyes never left the human. She saw him stand against monsters no one else dared to face. To her, he was not just a soldier. He was a hero from the old stories. Minutes felt like hours. The last raider in the plaza fell, smoking, its armor cracked open. Daniel dropped the alien rifle, breathing hard, sweat running down his face. His armor was scorched, his arms trembling from exhaustion. But he was alive. He turned and saw the princess staring at him, her eyes wide with disbelief. She had expected death. Instead, this strange human stood over her, covered in dust and blood, but victorious. Daniel knelt, lowering his voice. "Are you hurt?" The princess shook her head slowly. "No, but my daughter, she is frightened." Daniel looked at the little girl who tried to hide behind her mother's dress, but peeked at him with tearful eyes. He gave her a tired smile. "It's all right, kid. You're safe now." The princess stepped closer. Her people had spoken of humans as reckless wanderers, mercenaries who sold their guns for credits. But this one had risked everything without being asked. No payment. Number orders. No promise of reward. Only courage. She whispered softly, almost in awe. "You saved my child." Daniel shrugged, trying to hide the weight of what had just happened. Someone had to. Before he could say more, the sky above roared with engines. More raider ships. "We're coming." The fight wasn't over. But in that moment, something had changed. The princess no longer saw a mercenary. She saw a protector. And Daniel knew he could not leave them now. The battle for the city still raged, but in that plaza, a bond had been forged. Human had stood between death and royalty, and the galaxy would never forget what came of it. The city still burned when Daniel led the princess and her child away from the shattered plaza. Smoke rose from every street, and the distant roar of battle echoed through the night. The raiders had not stopped. They pressed deeper into the capital, cutting off escape routes, hunting for the royal bloodline. Daniel moved carefully, keeping his rifle ready, scavenged from a fallen raider. His armor was dented, one shoulder scorched from plasma fire, but his eyes stayed sharp. He scanned every rooftop, every corner. The princess held her daughter close, her silver hair darkened by ash, but she walked without stumbling. The child clung to her mother, quiet now, watching Daniel with wide, curious eyes. They reached an old service tunnel hidden beneath a collapsed fountain. Daniel found it by instinct, reading the city like a map. He didn't trust the wide streets or the main gates, too obvious, too dangerous. The tunnel smelled of rust and damp air, but it led them away from the fighting. For a long while, the only sounds were their footsteps and the distant rumble of war. Then, when they finally reached a quiet chamber lit by broken lamps, the princess spoke. "You are not of my people," she said softly. Her voice carried the tone of royalty, calm even in fear. "And yet you fight for us. Why?" Daniel paused, adjusting his rifle. "Because you had a child with you. You didn't need any other reason." Her eyes narrowed slightly, studying him as if trying to understand. "Among my kind, few would risk so much for a stranger." Daniel gave a faint, tired smile. "Maybe. That's the difference between us and them." The child stirred in her arms, whispering something in her mother's language. The princess soothed her with a gentle touch before looking back at Daniel. "What is your name?" "Daniel Cross," he answered simply. She nodded slowly. "I am Princess Celine, daughter of the High Throne." In this she lowered her gaze. "To the little one in her arms is Arya, my daughter, the next in the royal line." Daniel looked at the child, who now peeked shyly at him from behind her mother's shoulder. He gave her a small nod. "Nice to meet you, Arya." The child blinked, then gave a timid smile. They rested only a short time. Daniel knew staying still was death. Raiders would sweep every tunnel eventually. He led them through the underground passages until they emerged near the palace walls. The great towers loomed above them, scarred by fire but still standing. When the guards saw Princess Celine alive, they dropped to one knee, overwhelmed with relief. Their shouts carried across the courtyard, and soon more soldiers rushed to escort her inside. Daniel followed quietly, his rifle still in hand, eyes scanning for danger even as he stepped into the grand halls. The palace was unlike anything he had ever seen. Marble pillars rose like trees, and stained glass windows glowed faintly even through the smoke outside. Nobles in rich robes hurried through the corridors, their faces pale with fear. The moment they saw Daniel, whispers spread. "A human," one muttered. "What is he doing here?" Another sneered. "He has no place in the royal halls." Daniel ignored them. He had walked through too many battlefields to care about whispers. But Princess Celine stopped in the center of the hall, her daughter still in her arms, and raised her voice so all could hear. "This man," she declared, "saved my child. Without him, the heir to the throne would be lost. Remember his face? For he is not our enemy. He is our protector." The nobles fell silent. Their eyes flicked from the princess to the human standing beside her, his armor battered, his hands still stained with battle. Some looked uneasy, others angry, but none dared speak against her. Daniel shifted uncomfortably under their gaze. He wasn't used to being called a protector. To him, it had just been the right thing to do. The princess turned to him, her expression softening. "You saved my child, Daniel Cross. Your reward awaits." The words echoed through the hall. Daniel frowned, slightly unsure what she meant. "Reward?" he asked, but she did not answer yet. Instead, she guided him deeper into the palace, past wide doors and guarded chambers, until they reached her private quarters where the child could rest. Arya, exhausted, curled up in a silken chair and soon drifted into sleep. A hand across her daughter's hair before facing Daniel again. "You risked your life without hesitation," she said. That is something even my finest knights could not do. In my culture, such courage cannot go unrecognized. But you will be honored, not as a servant, but as one who stood beside royalty in our darkest hour." Daniel shook his head. "I didn't do it for honor or for reward. I just couldn't walk away." Her eyes softened further. "That is exactly why you must be honored. Too many in this palace act only for power or wealth. You act from the heart. That is rare." Before Daniel could reply, the chamber doors opened and several nobles entered. Their robes were clean despite the ash outside, their faces proud but wary. One of them, an older man with sharp eyes, stepped forward. "Your Highness," he said, with a bow, "this human does not belong here. He was a mercenary, a wanderer. To grant him honor would insult your loyal knights." Daniel almost laughed. He had expected this. The noble's voice carried more venom than concern. But Celine did not flinch. "You were not there," she answered coldly. "You did not see the blood on the plaza, nor the raiders closing in. Daniel Cross stood when no one else could. He fought for me, for my child, for this empire." "Do you call that an insult?" The noble stiffened, caught in her gaze. He bowed again, reluctantly, and withdrew. Daniel scratched at his scarred armor, uncomfortable with all of it. He had never wanted attention, but Celine's eyes held a quiet determination. He realized then that she meant every word she spoke. Later that night, as the palace prepared its defenses and the fires outside dimmed, Celine summoned Daniel again. This time the room was empty except for the two of them. Arya slept peacefully. In a smaller chamber nearby, "You wonder what I meant by reward," she said quietly. Daniel nodded. "Yeah, you don't owe me anything. I didn't come here looking for gifts." Celine stepped closer, her silver hair glinting in the lantern light. "The reward I speak of is not gold, nor titles, nor jewels. It is something greater. It is trust. I offer you a place at my side, not as a servant, but as my champion. A protector sworn to the princess and to me." Daniel froze, taken aback. "Me? I'm no knight. I'm just a soldier who doesn't know when to quit." She smiled faintly. "Perhaps that is what makes you worthy? My knights are bound by rules and pride. You are bound by something stronger, your heart. That is what saved us." For the first time in years, Daniel had no words. He had walked alone for so long, drifting from one war to another, never belonging anywhere. And now, a princess offered him a place by her side. He finally let out a long breath. "If that's what you want, then, yeah, I'll stay. Protect you both, as long as I'm breathing." Selena's expression softened into something almost gentle. "Then it is decided. Your reward is not gold, Daniel Cross. It is a bond that will change the future of this empire." Outside, the fires of war still burned, but inside that chamber, a promise had been made. A human, once dismissed as nothing more than a mercenary, was now bound to the royal bloodline by loyalty and courage. And in the days to come, that bond would shake the galaxy itself. The palace grew quieter as the night stretched on, but the silence was heavy, filled with fear. Outside the walls, the city still smoldered from the raid. Smoke curled up into the night sky, glowing faintly from the fires that burned in the ruins. The people huddled in their homes, waiting, praying, wondering if the raiders would return at dawn. Inside the palace, nobles argued in secret chambers. Guards whispered in the halls. And Daniel Cross stood alone at a balcony, staring out over the broken city. He could not sleep. The fight in the plaza replayed in his mind. Every shot, every cry, every moment he had stood against the raiders. His muscles still ached, his armor was battered, and his rifle was little more than scrap. But his eyes stayed sharp. Years of war had taught him never to relax in a place that smelled of smoke and fear. Behind him, footsteps echoed. He turned and saw Princess Celine approaching, her long robes brushing the marble floor. She carried herself with grace, though. Daniel could see the weight on her shoulders. "You do not rest," she said softly. Daniel shook his head. "Can't too much noise in my head." Celine stepped beside him, looking out at the city. My people whispered that the empire has been weakened. They believe the raiders struck with the help of traitors within our walls. Perhaps they are right. Daniel glanced at her. Think someone let them in? Her eyes narrowed. Think someone wanted me dead and my child with me. The raiders knew exactly where to strike. They knew our defenses, our weaknesses. That knowledge could only come from inside. Daniel grunted. It wasn't surprising. In his life, he had seen plenty of noble families eat each other alive for power. Then you've got enemies under your own roof. Selena's jaw tightened. Yes, and they will not stop. Saving my child once may not be enough. Daniel looked at her for a moment, then gave a faint, tired smile. Then we make sure they don't get a second chance. The princess studied him, her silver eyes calm, but burning with quiet fire. You speak like a man who has lived with betrayal. Daniel shrugged. Seen it too many times. Out there, it's never the bullet you hear that kills you. It's the one from behind. For a moment, neither spoke. The night wind carried faint cries from the city, mixed with the smell of smoke. Then a guard approached, bowing quickly. Your Highness, he said, his voice uneasy. The council demands your presence at once. They say the Empire must decide how to respond to the raid. Selene sighed, straightening her shoulders. Very well, tell them I'm coming. The guard bowed again and left. Daniel frowned. Sounds like they're more worried about talking than fighting. Selene gave a small smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. That is the way of nobles. Daniel Cross. They speak while others bleed. She began to walk, and Daniel followed, his steps heavy but steady. The council chamber was vast, lit by tall lamps and filled with robed figures seated around a great circular table. Their faces were proud, but their eyes darted nervously, like birds waiting for a storm. When Selene entered, the room fell silent. When Daniel stepped in behind her, the silence deepened into whispers. That human again. Why is he here? He has no place among us. Selene ignored them. She took her seat, her daughter resting safely in a guarded chamber nearby. Daniel stood behind her chair, his hand resting near the weapon at his side, the eldest noble. A man with a voice as sharp as glass rose. Your Highness, the raid proves what we feared. The Empire is weak. Our enemies test us, and we fail. The people will lose faith. Another noble leaned forward. We must tighten control, seal the borders, cut trade, call back the armies. Fear will keep the raiders away. A third voice broke in, softer, but more dangerous. Or perhaps it is time for new leadership. Throne has grown careless. It cannot protect even the air. The words struck the chamber like a blade. Daniel's eyes narrowed. He could see it now, greedy faces hiding behind polite tones, waiting for the right moment to strike. Selene's voice rang clear, calm but strong. The raiders came because they were invited. Someone among us opened the gates. Do not speak to me of weakness, while traitors sit at this very table. Gasps filled the room. The nobles shifted uneasily, some indignant, others nervous. The eldest noble sneered. And what proof have you, princess? Will you accuse your council without evidence? Selene did not flinch. Proof is in the blood spilled outside these walls, and I will find the hand that guided the knife. Daniel watched their faces carefully. He had learned long ago how to read men in war. The sneer of arrogance, the twitch of fear, the eyes that refused to meet hers, he could see guilt hiding among them. But he said nothing. He was not here to speak. He was here to protect. The meeting dragged on, words like daggers flying across the chamber. Finally, Selene rose, her robes sweeping the floor. Enough. The throne will act. We will rebuild, and the raiders will pay.
Oh.
This meeting is ended.
Oh.
The nobles grumbled, but none dared defy her openly. One by one, they filed out their whispers. Trailing behind them, Daniel followed Selene back through the halls. He could see the tension in her posture, the fire hidden beneath her calm. When they reached her private chamber, she stopped and turned to him. You saw them, she said quietly. Daniel nodded. No doubt about it. She lowered her voice. Then it is only a matter of time before they act again. She was right. That night, as the palace settled into uneasy sleep, shadows moved through the halls. Figures cloaked in black crept past guards who were either bribed or blind. Their blades gleamed faintly in the dim light. Daniel had been half asleep on a bench. Outside Selena's chamber, when he heard the faint scrape of a door, his eyes snapped open. Years of war had trained him to wake at the smallest sound. He rose silently, drawing his knife, and moved toward the noise. The door to the princess's chamber creaked open. Inside, Selene stirred in her sleep, her child resting at her side. The assassin raised his blade. Daniel struck first. He grabbed the cloaked figure by the wrist, slamming him into the wall with brutal force. The blade clattered to the floor. Figure lunged from the shadows, but Daniel spun, driving his knife into the attacker's chest. Blood sprayed across the marble. Selene awoke with a cry, clutching her daughter close. The child whimpered, terrified, as more assassins burst through the windows, their blades flashing. Daniel moved like a storm, ripped a weapon from a fallen assassin, firing plasma bolts into the intruders. The chamber filled with light and smoke. He shielded Selene and her daughter with his own body, forcing the assassins back step by step. But there were too many. A blade slashed across his arm, cutting deep. He gritted his teeth, shoving the attacker back with raw strength. Another leapt at him, but he smashed the butt of his weapon into the assassin's skull, dropping him instantly. Selena's guards finally burst in, drawn by the noise, and joined the fight. Within minutes, the assassins lay dead or dying on the floor. The chamber reeked of blood and smoke. Daniel stood in the center, his arm bleeding, his chest heaving, but still on his feet. He turned and Selene was staring at him again with the same look she had worn in the Plaza Disbelief. Awe and something deeper she did not yet speak aloud. "You saved us again," she whispered. Daniel shook his head, pressing a hand against it. "His wound? Not done saving you yet. Whoever sent them won't stop until you and the kid are gone." Selene looked at her sleeping daughter, who had cried herself into exhaustion, then back at Daniel. Her voice was steady, but her eyes burned with fire. "Then let them come. With you beside us, they will learn what it means to face not only a princess, but a human who fights with more heart than 1,000 nobles." Daniel gave a tired grin. "Guess I'm your reward after all?" And in that moment, in the blood-stained chamber of the royal palace, a bond deeper than any noble title was sealed. A human had faced death twice for a princess and her child. And the traitors hiding in the shadows of the empire would soon learn what kind of enemy they had made. The morning after the assassination attempt, the palace was tense. Guards doubled their patrols, the nobles whispered louder than ever, and the servants moved quickly with their eyes cast down. Word had already spread through the capital. Assassins had reached the royal chambers. Rumors grew with each telling, some claiming the princess had died, others saying the heir had been taken, but the truth was simpler and far more dangerous. The throne was not safe within its own walls. Daniel stood near the great doors of Selene's chamber, his wounded arm bandaged tightly. He refused to rest despite the physician's orders. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the blade raised above Selene and her daughter. He had promised himself that it would not happen again. Inside the chamber, Selene sat near the window with her daughter in her lap. Arya had fallen asleep, her small hand curled around her mother's fingers. Selene stroked her hair, her eyes distant but filled with fire. When Daniel entered, she looked up at him. The assassins came from within. These walls. We can no longer pretend otherwise. Daniel nodded grimly. They knew the guard patterns. They knew where you'd be. Someone fed them everything. Selena's voice was calm, but her words carried iron. It was the council, or at least some among them. They test me with shadows before they strike in the open. Daniel leaned against the wall, crossing his arms. Then we test them back, make them show their hand. She tilted her head slightly, curious. And how would a soldier of no court plan such a thing? Daniel gave a small shrug. Same way you smoke out traitors on the battlefield, you leave bait. You set the trap, and then you wait for the rats to run into it. For a moment Selene studied him in silence. Then slowly she smiled. Perhaps you are no courtier, Daniel Cross, But you understand survival better than any noble I have known. The decision was made. Selene summoned the council for a new meeting, officially. It was to discuss rebuilding the city and preparing for another raid. Unofficially, it was to draw out the ones who had turned against her. Daniel stood behind her chair once more, his presence a quiet warning to anyone who dared act against her. The chamber filled with nobles, their robes fresh and faces carefully composed. But Daniel could see it, the nervous eyes, the stiff shoulders, the way some avoided looking at Selene directly. He had seen that same look in deserters before a battle. Selene spoke with clear authority. The throne still stands. The heir still lives. The raiders may strike again, but they will find us ready. We will rebuild the defenses of the capital, and we will rally the armies of the outer worlds. Now murmurs rippled around the table. One noble, a heavy man with jeweled rings on his fingers, scoffed. Your Highness, the people are afraid. The treasury bleeds. To call the armies now would bring ruin. Another, the sharp-eyed elder who had sneered before, leaned forward. Perhaps it is not ruin we fear, but futility. The throne has failed to keep us safe. If assassins walk these halls, what hope do we have against fleets? Daniel's hand tightened on the grip of his blade. He had no patience for cowards hiding their schemes in polite words. But Selena's voice cut through the chamber, calm and commanding. You speak of failure while I breathe. Do you forget who kept the heir alive? Who bled to keep her safe? It was not this council. It was not your wealth or your words. It was courage. Something some of you have long forgotten. Her gaze swept across the table, and many nobles lowered their eyes. Daniel almost smiled. She didn't need a blade to cut them down. But the elder noble sneered again, his tone dripping with false respect. And what of this human you place at your side? He is no knight, no sworn guardian, yet you raise him above us. Tell me, princess, is the empire to be protected by an off-world mercenary? The room stirred with whispers, the question biting. Deep Selene did not hesitate. She rose to her feet, her voice carrying like thunder. This human saved the heir when all others failed. He stood where you would not. He bled while you hid. He is more loyal than any traitor in noble robes. If you cannot see that, then perhaps it is not the throne that has failed, but you. Daniel's jaw tightened. It wasn't used to being defended, especially not by royalty. But Selena's words struck the chamber like a hammer. The elder noble stiffened, his face dark with fury. He bowed stiffly, but Daniel saw the hatred burning in his eyes. That was the hand they needed to see. The meeting ended with uneasy silence. Plans were made for rebuilding, though Daniel knew most of the council would drag their feet. But the bait had been set, and the rat had shown its teeth. That night, Daniel and Selene walked through the quiet gardens behind the palace. The moonlight reflected off silver leaves, and the air was heavy with the scent of flowers untouched by war. Arya walked ahead, her laughter soft and bright as she chased glowing insects. For a moment, it almost felt like peace. But Selena's voice was low when she spoke. The elder will not wait long. He knows I suspect him now. Daniel nodded, watching the shadows between the trees. Then we'll be ready. Selene turned to him, her expression thoughtful. You put yourself at risk for us again and again. Why? You could walk away. You owe me nothing. Daniel looked at her, then at the child running among the glowing insects. His voice was steady, simple. Someone has to stand between you and the blade. And right now, that someone is me. Her eyes softened, though her face remained calm. Then perhaps the stars sent you here for a reason, Daniel. Cross. Before he could answer, a guard hurried into the garden, bowing quickly. Your Highness, raider ships have been sighted at the edge of the system. They approach with allies. It's not just raiders' warbands from 3 different clans. Daniel cursed under his breath. Looks like they've decided to finish the job. Straightened, her voice hard. Then we will meet them. The Empire does not bend. But Daniel saw the worry in her eyes. He knew the truth. The city's defenses were weak. The armies too far away. The council too divided. A fleet of warbands could crush them before help arrived, unless someone found another way. Later, as the palace prepared for the coming storm, Daniel stood alone in the armory, strapping on his repaired armor. His rifle had been replaced with a palace weapon, sleek and powerful, but he still carried his old knife. It had never failed him. Celine entered quietly, her robes replaced with light armor fit for command. She looked at him, her expression calm, but fierce. "You will fight again at my side?" Daniel gave a small smile. Wasn't planning to sit this one out. She nodded. "Then let them come. They believe us weak. They believe a throne protected by a human is already broken. Tomorrow they will learn how wrong they are." Daniel met her gaze. For a moment, the war outside seemed distant. What mattered was the bond forged in fire between them. He had come to this world a stranger, but now he stood not as a mercenary, but as the protector of a princess and her child, and as the drums of war echoed across the stars. He promised himself one thing: he would not let them fall, not while he still breathed.